My son slammed his hand on my kitchen table on Christmas Eve and told me the house was his now, as if my whole life could be claimed like something he was owed. His voice clashed with the soft carol music playing in the background just as the deputy stepped into the doorway behind him. The tree lights flickered across the room, casting small bursts of color on the forged document he pushed toward me. The paper trembled slightly in his grip, and for a moment I wondered if he realized how far he had gone. Outside, the wind swept against the siding, but inside it was his breathing that filled the space. "Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said, though his eyes kept flicking toward the deputy. He had rehearsed those words. Confidence can sound sharp, but it also breaks fast. The deputy moved closer. "Ma'am, I need to verify something with you." He lifted the document, his brow tightening as he studied the signature. Even before he spoke again, I could see doubt settling into his features. My son shifted, the mask slipping for just a second. A tremor crossed his jaw. 40 years of motherhood teaches you to recognize the cracks no one else sees. Then I noticed something else, an ink smudge near the bottom of the page. Not mine, not accidental. A small detail with a much larger story behind it, one that told me my son hadn't forged this alone. "Ma'am," the deputy said quietly, "this doesn't look like your handwriting." The room grew still. The soft glow of the tree lights shimmered across the countertop. An ornament swayed gently on its hook, as if the house itself sensed the shift. I didn't raise my voice or reach for the paper. In that moment, with my son trying so hard to look in control, I finally understood the truth I had been avoiding. He wasn't the mastermind, he was the weapon. But to understand how all of this began, how the lies took shape, how trust fractured, and how I discovered who was really behind it, I need to take you back to the day everything started to unravel. I didn't know the day would matter. Winter mornings rarely do. They slide into the house quietly, soft light settling on the countertops, the kettle whispering to itself. The kind of morning that asks nothing from you except to breathe and move slowly. At my age, I've learned that slow is a blessing. I stood at the kitchen sink watching a thin line of steam rise from my cup. The pine wreath on the window frame had begun to droop, just slightly, and I made a mental note to mist it again. Outside, the yard lay still under a thin layer of frost, sparkling faintly in the early light. It was peaceful, undisturbed, exactly the kind of December morning I've always loved. That was when the phone rang. I didn't rush. I never rush for the phone. People who call in a hurry rarely need what they say they do. But when I saw my son's name on the screen, I felt something in my chest shift. Not dread, not worry exactly, just that familiar tightening I've come to associate with him over the last few years. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was warm. Too warm. It almost covered the strain underneath it. "Well, this is a surprise," I said. "You're up early." He laughed softly, but even the laugh sounded practiced. "Thought I'd check in, see how you're doing. Maybe stop by later, help you get ready for Christmas." I glanced around the kitchen. Garland on the cabinets. Pies cooling on the counter. Presents wrapped beneath the small tree. "Everything's already ready," I said gently. "Well, maybe I can still come by, just to visit." That was when the tightening inside me sharpened. He's never been a spontaneous visitor, not in years, not since things shifted between us after his father died. Grief shapes some people into tenderness, others into distance. I swallowed, kept my tone easy. "Of course. Come by whenever you like." He said he'd be over around noon. But when I hung up, a quiet thought settled into my mind, one I'd learned not to ignore. Something wasn't right. I moved through the house slowly, finishing the small things I like to do before guests arrived. I straightened the books on my side table, adjusted the blanket on the couch. The little motions mattered. They let me feel the rhythm of my own life, the one I'd kept steady long after my children grew up and made lives of their own. By 11:30, I had the kettle warming again. By 11:40, I was slicing a lemon. And by 11:50, I was staring out the window, watching flakes of snow drift down in lazy spirals, wondering if he'd changed his mind. He didn't. He arrived 10 minutes early. The moment he stepped into the house, I felt it. The energy around him had weight. He hugged me, but his arms were stiff, as if his mind was already somewhere else. His eyes scanned the room in a way I couldn't quite name. Taking stock, maybe. Calculating. "You look good, Mom," he said, forcing a smile. "You do too," I said, even though he didn't. His face looked drawn, the way someone looks when sleep has been traded for worry. He walked into the kitchen without asking, his old habit, and sat at the table. I poured tea for both of us and sat across from him. He kept glancing at my desk in the corner. "You've done a lot for Christmas," he said, nodding toward the tree. "I like doing it," I said. "It keeps me busy." He tapped the table lightly. "You know, with the house and everything, it must be a lot to manage alone." There it was. Not the words I had feared, but the shape of them. I felt the shift, quiet but undeniable. "I manage just fine," I said. I know you do." He lifted his cup but didn't drink. "I just worry. These old houses take work. And the paperwork, utilities, property stuff, bank accounts, everything gets complicated. It hasn't felt complicated to me." He pressed his lips together, then looked down at his hands. "Mom, have you thought about maybe letting me help with some of that?" There were 100 ways he could have asked. This wasn't one of them. "I appreciate the offer," I said, keeping my tone soft. "But I'm comfortable, truly." He nodded, but the nod was quick, unconvincing. His eyes drifted again toward my desk. A stack of bills sat neatly arranged. A folder of documents. Nothing remarkable, unless you were looking for something. I watched him carefully. 40 years of motherhood leaves you fluent in your children's subtleties. His shoulders were tight. His fingers drummed the table. His gaze carried a flicker of something like urgency. Or guilt. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. "What are you really here for?" I asked quietly. He blinked, surprised I'd said it out loud. "I told you," he said. "I wanted to visit. And check on things." The pause between his words stretched just a little too long. I didn't push him. Pushing rarely reveals anything but resistance. Instead, I smiled softly and changed the subject, letting the conversation drift to the kids, holiday plans, and memories that made us both laugh. But underneath the warmth, something was pulsing. He wasn't himself. And not once, in the hour that followed, did he truly relax. When he stood to leave, he hesitated near the desk. Just for a second. But a second is all it takes to reveal intent. "Do you need something from there?" I asked. He startled slightly. No, I was just thinking we should go through your paperwork sometime. Make sure everything's organized." "It already is," I said. He nodded again, too quickly, then kissed my cheek and walked out into the soft falling snow. I watched from the window as he made a phone call before pulling out of the driveway. His posture changed as he spoke, less strained, more resolute. Whoever was on the other end, he trusted them enough to let down the face he'd worn for me. The flakes kept drifting down, quiet and patient. My house felt still, almost listening. Something was shifting. Not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. At my age, I've learned the quiet changes are the ones that matter most. I didn't know it then, standing at that window with snow catching on the sill, that this was the day everything began to unravel. The day the lies started threading themselves into my life. The day my son stepped across a line neither of us could see. But I felt it, somewhere deep, like a faint crack beneath my feet. and I knew it wouldn't stay faint for long. The next day began the way most of my days do now, quietly, without urgency. Snow had settled a little thicker overnight. From my bedroom window, the world looked dusted in powdered sugar, the kind my mother used to sift over cakes when I was a girl. I dressed slowly, my joints reminding me that time had done its work but not taken everything. I still moved on my own. I still cooked my own meals. I still knew where every paper in this house was kept. Some people call that stubborn. I call it being alive. By mid-morning, I had made a list for the grocery store. I needed sugar, eggs, and a few things for Christmas Eve dinner. I slipped my notepad into my purse and was reaching for my coat when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find my son standing there again, hands in his pockets, breath fogging in the cold. He'd always hated the cold as a boy. Today, he looked like he barely noticed it. 2 days in a row, I said, forcing a smile. People will talk. He gave a short laugh and stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. Yeah, well, I thought I'd come by and help you out. Maybe drive you to the store. Roads are getting icy. I was just about to head out, I said. I can drive? Mom. He said it the way someone might say child. You really shouldn't be out driving when the streets are like this. One patch of ice and... He made a small skidding gesture with his hand, as if I might shatter on impact. I've been driving in winter longer than you've been alive, I said gently. Exactly. He smiled, but there was an edge in it. You've had a good run. No reason to push your luck. The words were light. The message wasn't. I felt them settle somewhere deep. Not because they were true, but because they weren't. They were an argument setting itself up, brick by brick. I'll let you drive if you'd like, I said, but not because I can't manage. Sure, he said, shrugging. Whatever makes you comfortable. It didn't, but I let it pass. In the car, he drove a little faster than I would have. His hands flexed around the steering wheel, his jaw tight. On the radio, carols played softly, the singer's voice smooth and distant. He tapped his fingers in time, then out of time, then stopped tapping altogether. You know, he said, not looking at me, I've been thinking more about what we talked about yesterday. We talked about a lot of things. The house, the paperwork, your situation. My situation, I repeated. He cleared his throat. I just mean you're on your own. You could use someone looking out for you. I've read about this stuff. Scams. People targeting the elderly. You might not always realize when you're being taken advantage of. The irony of that settled heavily between us. I appreciate your concern, I said, but I do keep track of things. Right, he said. But you know how memory gets. He glanced at me with what he probably thought was a sympathetic smile. It's not your fault. It's just brain chemistry. I still remember the day you broke your arm falling out of Mrs. Talbot's apple tree, I said calmly. You were 7. You told her it was my fault for letting you climb too high. You cried the whole way to the hospital and told the nurse you wanted a blue cast, not a white one. They were out of blue. You sulked for 2 days. He blinked, surprised, then gave a small laugh. Okay, so your memory's decent. Better than decent, I said. Don't bury me before it's time. He didn't argue, but his silence felt like a disagreement he'd simply postponed. At the store, he insisted on pushing the cart. He reached for items before I could. When I looked at prices, he sighed, gently impatient, as if I was too slow for him. Just grab the one you always get, he said when I hesitated between 2 brands of flour. One is on sale, I said. It's 50 cents, Mom. Yes, I replied. 50 cents is 50 cents. He rolled his eyes. Not dramatically, just enough. The kind of small gesture he might not have made if I were anyone but his mother. The kind he was sure I wouldn't call him on. I didn't. I just watched. At the checkout, when I reached for my wallet, he placed his hand over mine. I've got it, he said. You save your money. I have money, I said. Yeah, he replied, for now. It stung more than I let it show. On the drive back, he kept circling the same topic: how old houses are expensive, how systems fail, how emergencies happen, how families need to plan ahead before it's too late. Each phrase was wrapped in concern, tied with a ribbon of duty, but the weight underneath was heavier than that. There was urgency, and something else, a kind of impatience that made me feel like an obstacle instead of a person. When we pulled into the driveway, he didn't kill the engine right away. He sat there, staring at the front of the house. You know, he said, if you wanted to simplify things, there are options. You could transfer some things to my name, just for safekeeping. People do it all the time. People also fall downstairs all the time, I said. Doesn't mean I should start jumping, he sighed. Mom, I'm trying to help you. I know you think you are. He looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to decide whether it was worth pushing further. Whatever he saw on my face, he backed off, for the moment. Let's get these inside, he said. Once we were back in the kitchen, he set the bags on the counter and moved through the space like it already belonged to him. He opened cabinets, rearranged canned goods, shifted my spices. There, he said. At least now, things are where they make sense. They made sense to me, I replied. He smiled tightly. You'll adjust. It was such a small thing, moving a jar of cinnamon from one shelf to another. But small things add up. A jar, a comment, a look, a tone. They're all pebbles sliding slowly toward the edge of a cliff. When we finished putting everything away, I expected him to leave. Instead, he drifted toward the living room, then to the hallway, then to the corner where my small desk sat under the window. I watched from the kitchen doorway as he lingered there, glancing back to see if I was looking. I pretended not to be. He opened the top drawer, very slowly, the way someone does when they're not sure whether they're allowed. My mouth went dry, but I stayed where I was. Looking for something? I called, keeping my voice light. He flinched, just a little. Just seeing if you've got stamps. You said you wanted to mail out cards, remember? I hadn't said that. My cards were already mailed. I keep stamps in the blue tin by the phone, I said. He closed the drawer too quickly, knocking a pencil off the edge of the desk. It dropped to the floor with a small, sharp sound. He bent to pick it up, and when he straightened, I saw it. A folded document, half tucked under his arm, as if it had been there for some time, or he was trying very hard to make it seem that way. What's that? I asked. This? He glanced down as if noticing it for the first time. Oh, just something I brought. Some information for you to look at. No big deal. He slipped it into his jacket pocket before I could see more than the edge. White paper, a hint of a seal, the faint outline of lines that looked a lot like the ones on legal forms. My heart gave a quiet, measured beat against my ribs. You could have just asked me, I said. For what? Whatever it is you're looking for. He smiled in a way I didn't recognize. Not cruel, not kind, just hollow. I don't want to bother you with details. That's why I'm here, to take this off your plate. I haven't said I want anything taken off my plate. Not yet, he murmured. There it was again, the way he spoke about my life as if it were a problem to be solved, not something I was still living. He checked his watch. I should go. I've got a meeting. What kind of meeting? I asked. Work stuff? He said too quickly. You wouldn't be interested. It's boring. People always say, it's boring, when they really mean, I don't want you asking questions. After he left, the house fell back into its quiet rhythm, but not the same one as before. Silence feels different when you know it's holding something back. I walked to the desk and opened the drawer he'd gone through. Everything looked the same at first glance. Stamps, pens, checkbook, a folder with old bank statements. I flipped through them one by one. Nothing obvious was missing. Nothing obviously added. Still, my skin prickled. On the edge of the desk, The pencil he'd knocked over lay slightly out of line with the others. It would have been nothing any other day. Today, it felt like evidence. As I straightened it, I noticed an envelope tucked deeper in the drawer than I usually kept them. My name on the front. An unfamiliar return address on the back, from 3 towns over. I hadn't seen it before. I opened it carefully. Inside was a Christmas card, simple, with a painted winter scene, and a note in neat, looping handwriting I recognized with a jolt. It had been more than 30 years since I'd seen that handwriting. Dear Margaret, I heard through an old friend that your husband passed some time ago. I'm sorry for your loss. There are things I've carried for years about what happened back then, and I wonder if it's finally time we talked. Below was a name I thought I had left in another life. I stared at the card, the edges of the paper soft against my fingers. For a moment, the kitchen blurred, replaced by memories of nights spent at the dining room table with my husband, going over numbers, talking about trust and betrayal, and the cost of doing the right thing. My son wasn't there for those conversations. He was too young then. But some shadows live long after the lights are turned off. I folded the card back into its envelope and set it on the desk, my hand resting on top of it. My son had been in this drawer. This drawer had held a letter linked to the one piece of our past I never told him about. A past that involved a man who would have had reason to resent my husband. A past that involved money and pride and consequences. Maybe it was all a coincidence. Maybe. But at my age, I've learned that coincidences usually aren't. I looked around my quiet house, at the tree, the lights, the small, glittering promises of the season. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something else had started falling too. Not snow, not ornaments, pieces. Of a story I hadn't finished telling, of a truth I hadn't finished facing. And somewhere between my son's empty smile and that old familiar handwriting, I could feel the pressure building, slowly but relentlessly, like a hand at the small of my back, nudging me toward a place I wasn't ready to go. Not yet, but soon. The next morning arrived with a low gray sky and a heaviness that felt almost physical. Snow had stopped falling, but the world outside looked pressed down by the weight of cloud cover, as if even the day itself sensed what was coming. I made oatmeal the same way I always do. 1 measured scoop of oats, a handful of raisins, a pinch of salt. Routine has a way of steadying the nerves. But my hands weren't as steady as usual. Not trembling, just listening to something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. My son's visit replayed in my memory, each moment clearer than the last. The drawer, the pencil, the document tucked under his arm, the pressure in his voice disguised as concern, the way he kept treating me as if I were slipping, slowly, silently, into some fog I hadn't noticed. And the card, that card, the name signed at the bottom, was one I had hoped I'd never see again. Not out of hatred, but because some stories are too heavy to carry into New Year's, new houses, new versions of yourself. My husband and I had kept that chapter of our life sealed behind us. Locked, really. And I'd assumed the lock had rusted shut long ago. But now the past was tugging at me like a thread from an old sweater. I finished breakfast, washed my bowl, and was drying my hands when my phone buzzed. A text from my daughter. "Morning, Mom. Did you need help with anything today?" Sweet timing. She always had good timing, even when she didn't know why. I typed back, "No, sweetheart, I'm fine. Just doing housework." A moment later. "Have you talked to your brother? He said you seemed a little overwhelmed yesterday." Overwhelmed? That boy had some nerve. I typed slowly, "I'm not overwhelmed. He's concerned. A little too concerned." She sent a voice message, a habit she'd picked up once she became too busy to type long paragraphs. Her voice filled the kitchen. "Mom, he's just trying to help. You know how guys are. They want to fix things even when nothing's broken. Just be patient with him, okay? I listened to her tone. The soft understanding. The assumption that his perspective was the truthful one, that mine needed adjusting. It wasn't malicious. She meant well. But even well-meaning dismissal can sting. I am patient, I murmured after the message ended. Patient enough to know when something isn't what it looks like. I set the phone down and walked back to my desk. The envelope from yesterday lay neatly where I'd left it. I hadn't opened it again. I didn't need to. Every word in that card had etched itself into my mind. I pulled out my old document folder, not the one with current bills, but the deeper one, buried under years of papers I rarely touched. It contained pieces of a story I had once promised myself I'd keep quiet forever. I flipped through old tax forms, insurance papers, letters from lawyers. Then I found it, my husband's handwritten note from decades ago, a simple sheet of lined paper, folded twice and yellowed at the edges. If anything ever happens to me, look for the name Ruth Collins. She isn't who she says she is. My breath caught. Ruth Collins. The name on the Christmas card. Back then, she'd been tied to my husband's business partner. The partner who had promised him a clean deal. The partner who later tried to shift the blame for missing funds onto my husband when the truth came out. Ruth had defended him fiercely. Too fiercely. She had accused my husband of everything under the sun. In the end, it was her family that was found at fault. I hadn't heard from her since the settlement, since the shouting, since the day she'd stood in our doorway saying she would never forget what we did to her. And now, 30 years later, her handwriting had found its way back into my life. I folded the note and placed it beside the card. My son didn't know any of this history, but someone had told him something. Or someone had pulled him into something. A knock interrupted my thoughts. I froze. It was late morning, too early for delivery drivers, too calm a day for neighbors to wander. When I opened the door, a woman stood there. Not young, not old. Maybe late 50s. Brown hair tucked behind her ears, coat zipped tight, a clipboard in her hand. "Good morning," she said brightly. "Mrs. Langley?" "Yes," I said, gripping the door a little tighter than usual. She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm with Comfort Care Services. Your son scheduled an evaluation for you today." "An evaluation," I repeated. "Yes, just a routine check for safety and cognitive wellness. Very normal for someone your age living alone. My age, living alone." Cognitive wellness. Each phrase landed like a pebble tossed at my dignity. "I didn't schedule anything," I said. "Oh, I know," she said lightly. "He scheduled it for you. He said you've been forgetting things." A small, sharp heat climbed up my throat. "I remember quite a lot," I said. "And I don't need evaluating." Her smile didn't falter. "Mrs. Langley, refusing a scheduled wellness visit can sometimes be taken as a red flag. Are you sure you don't want to let me in? Just for a quick look around?" She took a step forward, as if assuming permission. I didn't move. "Come back when my son is with you," I said. "That defeats the purpose," she said, still smiling. "We need to see how you function independently." "I function just fine." Her smile finally dropped. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be." She said it with the same tone my son had used in the flash forward, the same tone he would soon use at that table with the forged document. I stepped back, not out of fear, but clarity. "Leave," I said quietly. She stiffened, then straightened her coat. "We'll speak again," she said. "These things have a way of catching up." She walked away without looking back. I stood in the doorway, heart steady despite the anger blooming in my chest. Someone was trying very hard to box me in, to make me look incompetent, confused, unable to care for myself. And they thought I wouldn't notice. Back inside, the house felt smaller, the walls holding a silence that wasn't peaceful anymore. My phone buzzed again. A message from my son. "Don't forget, someone may stop by today. Just let them in. It's important." I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment as a deeper understanding settled through me. He wasn't guessing I needed help. He wasn't concerned for my safety. He was preparing something. Step by step, voice by voice, visit by visit. Someone had taught him how. I sat at my desk, the card from Ruth Collins glowing softly under the winter light. The past wasn't just returning. It was rearranging my present. And someone was counting on me to be too shaken, too confused, too old to stop it. They had no idea who I used to be. And they certainly had no idea who I still was. By the next morning, the cold had turned brittle. The kind of cold that makes the air feel sharp when you breathe it in. I stood by the window with my robe pulled tight, watching a thin crack of sun push through the clouds. The light felt weak, like it was trying its best and falling short. I understood the feeling. I didn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman from Comfort Care standing on my porch with that empty smile. Her voice kept looping in my mind. "Your son said you've been forgetting things. People can cut you without raising their voice." She had. By mid-morning, the heaviness in my chest had settled into something clearer. Resolve. If someone was probing around my life, I needed to know exactly how far they'd reached. And there was only one place that would show me the truth. The bank. I drove myself, despite the icy streets. My son would have made a scene if he knew, but he didn't. And he didn't need to. Some errands aren't meant to be shared. When I stepped inside, the heat from the lobby wrapped around me, soft and artificial. A young clerk at the desk smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Langley. What can we help you with today?" I lowered my voice. "I need to check on some recent activity on my accounts. Transfers, access attempts, anything unusual." "Oh, of course," she said, cheerful as ever. "Let me just pull that up." I watched her face closely as she typed. Her smile softened, then faded, then tightened in a way that people try to hide behind professionalism. She murmured. "Just a moment." "Take your time," I said, though my pulse had begun a quiet, steady drumbeat. She stood and gestured me toward a small office near the back. "Let's speak privately." Those words never mean good news. Inside, she closed the door. Her tone softened. "Mrs. Langley, it looks like someone attempted to make changes to your primary checking account yesterday. They came in requesting a power of attorney update." My stomach turned. "Who?" I asked. "Well," she hesitated. "The woman said she was helping you. She provided your name, your address, and said she had your authorization. She even tried to sign your name on one of the preliminary forms." She slid the screen gently toward me. There it was. My name, written in a script that looked almost right. Almost. "She wasn't with me," I said quietly. "I suspected as much," the clerk said. "The signature didn't match your records. Not exactly. It had the shape, but not the pressure. Not the rhythm. The rhythm, yes. She would know." "And this woman," I asked, "did she give you her name?" She nodded. "She said she was your care coordinator. Her name was Ruth." A cold, clean line of clarity ran through me. Ruth Collins. Of course. The clerk must have seen the shift in my expression. She leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Langley, do you feel safe? Do you need help?" I straightened, grounding myself. "I'm fine, but thank you." She looked unconvinced. "If there's anything we can do, alerts, freezes, additional verification protocols." "Yes," I said. "Put every protection you can on my accounts. Nothing moves without my presence. No exceptions." Of course, when I walked back to my car, the sky had darkened. Snow flurries drifted sideways, carried by a wind that had found its confidence. I sat for a moment, letting the heater warm the cabin, letting the truth settle into place. My son wasn't the one forging my signature. His handwriting was sloppy, rushed. This was precise, practiced, exactly the kind of careful manipulation Ruth Collins had always wrapped herself in. Someone had drawn my son into this. Someone had convinced him that I needed help or control, and someone had shown him how to take it. On the drive home, I dialed my daughter. She answered with the rustling sound of wind in the background. "Mom? Are you okay?" "Yes," I said. "Just wanted to hear your voice." She exhaled with relief. "I've been worried since yesterday. Your brother called me." "Of course he had. What did he say?" "Just that you seemed overwhelmed, a bit confused. He thinks you're under a lot of stress." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Did he say I asked for help?" "Well, no. But he said you might need more support. And maybe someone to help manage things." "Mom, he's only trying to look out for you." There it was again. The same narrative, fed to her gently, wrapped in concern, presented as truth simply because it sounded kind. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "do you think I'm confused?" "Mom." Her voice took on that soothing tone adult children use. "You're not confused. You're just older. Things get complicated." "No," I said. "People make them complicated." She didn't respond right away. "Please don't be hard on him." He said you snapped at him about paperwork. "I didn't snap," I said. "I corrected him." "Well, same thing, Mom." It wasn't, but arguing would only make me look defensive. Exactly what they expected. When we hung up, I felt the world tilt just slightly. Not enough to throw me, but enough to remind me I was standing on uneven ground. My own daughter believed him. Not because she chose to. Because the story was crafted to sound so reasonable. Back at home, the house felt dimmer. Or maybe I was just seeing it differently now. I walked to my desk again. The card from Ruth. The note from my husband. The small, subtle signs that someone had been weaving threads into my life while I was looking elsewhere. I opened the drawer. This time, something was out of place. A file folder with my insurance documents had been moved. Slightly, barely, but enough. I knew how I stacked things. I had always been tidy with paperwork, even when life wasn't tidy with me. I opened the folder. Everything looked normal at first glance. Then I saw it. A form I had never signed. A form transferring decision-making rights temporarily in case of medical incapacity. Blank in the signature space. Not filled in, not forged. Waiting. My breath drew in sharply but quietly. Always quietly. Someone wasn't just planning something. They were preparing the paperwork for when they believed the moment was right. And the moment, clearly, was close. I closed the folder slowly, set it down, and rested my hands on the edge of the desk. "So," I whispered to myself, "that's the game we're playing." A soft laugh escaped my throat. Not amusement. Recognition. I had lived long enough to know a setup when I saw one. They underestimated me. They always have. But they were about to learn something important. I may be old. I may be quiet. I may move slowly and speak gently and let people think they are guiding me. But I am not weak. I am not confused. And I do not lose track of the truth. I sat back, letting the weight of it all settle. The web was tightening. But webs are not cages. They are traps for the one who spun them. And soon enough, someone was going to step into their own. By the next afternoon, the sky had cleared, leaving behind a cold so crisp it felt like glass. I stood by the stove, stirring a pot of soup, the scent of time rising gently with the steam. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful again, until a shadow passed across the window. A car pulled into my driveway. Not my son's, not my daughter's. A dark sedan. Unfamiliar. Engine idling a beat too long. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with certainty. They were coming faster now. A soft knock followed. Measured. Controlled. Not the kind meant to startle. The kind meant to enter. I opened the door just enough to see her. Ruth Collins. Older now. Thinner. Face lined not from age but from a lifetime of carrying grudges like debt. Her hair was pinned neatly, too neatly, like she was trying to preserve an image she couldn't quite afford anymore. "Margaret," she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," I said quietly. Her smile twitched. "May I come in? Just for a moment." "No." She blinked at the word, unprepared for its simplicity. "Your son said." "You should stop starting sentences with my son," I said. "It gives away your strategy." She inhaled through her nose, once, sharply. "You always were difficult, and you always mistook boundaries for difficulty." Her expression hardened, the warmth dropping like a curtain. "I'm trying to help your son, Margaret." "He's in trouble. Real trouble. You know how far in debt he is?" My heart tightened, just for a second, but I kept my face still. "No," I said, "but I'm sure you do." Her jaw flexed. "He came to me. He asked for help. I gave him options. Options that could keep him afloat. You should be grateful." "Options?" I repeated. "Like forging my name? Like sending someone to evaluate my mind without consent? Like accessing my accounts?" Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw the truth she carried like a stain. Shame buried under decades of resentment. "If your husband hadn't dragged my family's name through the mud," she hissed, "none of us would be here." There it was, the past, rising like smoke. "You tried to frame him," I said. "He exposed the truth. He humiliated us. He told the truth." She stepped closer, voice tightening. "And now it's your turn to feel what we felt." A quiet cold slid through my arms. There it was, the motive, the root. The bitterness that had spent 30 years fermenting until it found a new host. My son. I lifted my chin. "You're using him. I'm helping him. You're weaponizing him," she scoffed. "He came to me desperate. You should have paid his debts years ago." "That was never my responsibility." "It is now, and once the paperwork is finalized." But she stopped, mid-sentence, mid-breath, because behind her, a car pulled into the driveway. My son. He got out in a rush, shoulders tense, guilt scrawled across his face. "Mom," he said, breath visible in the cold. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" "I didn't hear it," I lied. He glanced between me and Ruth, his jaw tightening. "I told her we should talk together." "No, you didn't," I said. He froze. Ruth looked at him sharply. A silent warning. A threat disguised as a look. But he wasn't good at hiding things. Not from me. "You're supposed to explain things to her," Ruth said under her breath, as if I couldn't hear. "She needs to understand why this is necessary." My son swallowed hard. I'm trying, she snapped. "You're barely holding it together." He looked wounded, like a child scolded in front of company. And for a moment, just a moment, the resentment I felt softened into something more complicated, something that hurt in a deeper, older way. "Son," I said gently, "come inside. Both of you stay out here. He hesitated, torn between the two of us. His eyes dropped. "Mom, please don't make things harder." "There it is again," I said, my voice steady. "Everyone keeps telling me I'm making things harder. Why? Because I still know my name? Because I can read documents? Because I don't sign what I don't understand?" His shoulders sagged. Shame flickered across his face, faint but real. Ruth stepped in front of him. "Don't listen to her doubt. She's overwhelmed. She's confused. I am not confused," I said, my tone still soft. "But I see very clearly now." Ruth's jaw tightened. "We're done here," she said, grabbing his arm. But he didn't move. "Let go," he muttered. She blinked. "What did you say?" "Let go," he repeated. "You said it would be simple. You said she wouldn't notice anything. You said she'd thank me." A faint shake traveled through his voice. "And now?" Ruth asked coldly. He didn't answer. "You think you can back out?" she continued. "After everything I've done to arrange this? After the debts I've paid? After the documents you brought me?" His eyes darted to me. There it was. The look of someone caught in a net they didn't even know existed until it tightened. Documents. Plural. Not just one. "What documents?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. His throat bobbed. "Mom, I tried. I didn't want to." "Don't tell her anything," Ruth snapped. "That was when my son did something I didn't expect." He flinched. Physically, as if her voice hit him like a hand. I saw it. She saw it too. But she pretended she didn't. "Mom," he said, voice cracking just slightly, "I never meant for it to go this far. I just needed help. I thought—" "You thought she was helping you." I finished for him. His face crumpled in the way people do when truth cuts through denial. Ruth stared at him with the fury of someone watching their carefully built scaffolding collapse. "You useless." "Don't," I said sharply. She turned on me. "You don't get to stop this. I already have." She laughed. A short, brittle sound. "You think you've stopped anything? It's already in motion. The claims, the paperwork, the reports. By tomorrow." And there it was. Tomorrow. The day everything would converge. Christmas Eve. I met her gaze and held it, calm and unmoving, the way my husband once said I could disarm a room without saying a word. "I know what you're doing," I said. "And tomorrow you'll learn I'm not as easy to erase as you hoped." For the first time, she looked uncertain. Just a flicker. A crack. But cracks spread quickly. She turned sharply and walked to her car. "We're not finished," she said over her shoulder. "No," I said. "We're not." My son watched her drive away, shoulders heavy with regret. He didn't apologize. Not yet. He wasn't ready to face the weight of it all. But I saw something change in him. Something vital. Doubt. Doubt in her. Doubt in the story he'd been fed. Doubt in the lies he'd been repeating. The web was tightening, yes, but not around me. It was tightening around the woman who spun it. And tomorrow she would learn what happens when a web begins to unravel. Christmas Eve has a way of making the world feel gentler than it is. Even the air seems softer, as if the cold has agreed to behave just for one night. I woke before dawn, the house wrapped in that familiar December hush. The tree lights, set on a timer, clicked on with a quiet glow that spread across the living room floor like spilled gold. I should have felt peace. I didn't. There was something waiting in the day, a shape at the edge of my thoughts, a weight behind every breath. I sat with a cup of tea and listened to the silence, letting it settle in my bones. I had been here before, on the edge of a storm only I could sense. Age doesn't dull instinct. If anything, it sharpens it. By mid-morning, the quiet was broken by the sound of heavy tires on snow. A car pulled up outside. Then another. Neither belonged to family. Pressure, arriving on schedule. A knock came. Too forceful to be friendly. I opened the door to find a man and a woman wearing matching jackets with the Comfort Care logo, clipboards in hand, expressions polished to a shine. "Mrs. Langley," the man said, "we need to complete yesterday's evaluation." "No," I replied, "you need to leave." He smiled like a man rehearsing empathy. "Your son approved the continuation." "That's interesting," I said. "Since this is my house, and I did not." The woman leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Langley, refusing wellness checks is a sign of cognitive decline. We only want to help you." There it was again, that quiet blade disguised as concern. "I'm not declining," I said. "I'm resisting." "Mom?" My son's voice came from behind me. He walked up the path, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders tight. Ruth followed behind him at a slower pace, as if she were royalty, arriving fashionably late to her own coronation. I stepped aside enough for him to see me. "What is this?" "Mom," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Please, don't make a scene." "A scene?" I repeated. "You brought them to my house without my consent." He sighed, long and loud, as if he'd been carrying my stubbornness on his back for years. "I just want to make sure you're safe. You've been forgetful, confused. You keep losing things. The list was manufactured. I hadn't lost anything." But his voice carried such practiced exasperation that even I felt the sting of doubt. Briefly. Then Ruth stepped forward. "Margaret," she said, tone smooth as polished glass, "your son has been doing everything he can for you. You should be grateful for that." I turned my head slowly, letting my gaze settle on hers. "I am grateful," I said softly, "for the reminder of exactly who you still are." Her eyes narrowed. My son stepped between us. "Mom, we're trying to help." "No," I said. "You're trying to control." A flicker crossed his eyes. Shame, fear, confusion. It was hard to tell which one belonged to him and which one belonged to the story Ruth had been feeding him. "I know you think you're fine," he said, pushing past his own discomfort. "But you've been under a lot of stress. You misread things. You're overwhelmed." "Overwhelmed," I repeated, tasting the word. "You keep using that. But I'm not the one who's drowning in debt." His breath caught. Ruth stiffened. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "I know enough," I said. "I know you forged my name at the bank. I know you accessed my accounts. I know you filed a claim on my well-being. And I know," I let my voice drop lower, quieter, "that the woman who once tried to destroy my husband now wants to finish the job." My son flinched so visibly it tore at something inside me. "Mom," he whispered, "please, please don't do this. Don't turn this into a battle." "It already is one," I said. "You just haven't realized who's on which side." Ruth stepped up, face tightening. "Margaret, listen to me carefully. If you refuse assistance today, the court can interpret that as diminished capacity. Your son may have no choice but to take legal steps for your own protection." "You mean your protection?" I said. The Comfort Care man cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we just need to run a simple evaluation." "You need a warrant," I said softly. They froze. "I'm still lucid enough to know my rights," I continued. "And I'm lucid enough to know when someone is trying to strip them from me." My son let out an exhale that trembled at the edges. "Why are you being so difficult?" "Because I see what you don't," I said gently. "You're being used." "Mom, stop!" "You brought her into my life," I continued, not knowing she brought something else with her. Her history with this family, her resentment, her desire to undo everything your father stood for. He closed his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, "she helped me." "At what cost?" He didn't answer. Ruth stepped in front of him like a shield. This is pointless. She's spiraling. She's paranoid. It's classic cognitive decline. I almost laughed. Not from humor, from astonishment. You're diagnosing me now? I'm observing symptoms, she snapped. Then observe this, I said, turning slowly toward her. My voice was calm, steady, even soft. You've spent 30 years waiting for a moment like this. A moment where you could make me small enough to step over on your way to revenge. But you forgot something important. And what's that? She asked. I don't break the way you think I do. A long silence stretched, thin as ice. Carols drifted faintly from a neighbor's house, carried by the wind. A gentle, peaceful melody that clashed with the tension in front of mine. My son shifted. Mom, please, can we just talk inside? No, I said, not with them. Ruth's expression went cold as the snow at her feet. You're making a terrible mistake. Perhaps, I said, but not as terrible as the one you made. And what mistake is that? I met her eyes and held them. You underestimated the wrong old woman. Her jaw twitched, and in that instant, small, nearly invisible, I saw it. A crack, a fear she didn't want anyone to see. Because she knew something I hadn't said out loud yet. I had proof. Or someone else did. And the truth was closing in faster than she was prepared for. My son looked from her to me, then back at her. Confusion, panic, realization, all three flickering across his expression. Mom? He whispered. What did you do? Nothing, I said. Yet. The comfort care pair exchanged a nervous look. Something had shifted, a balance, a certainty, a power neither side expected. Without another word, they backed away, muttering to Ruth that they needed clarification, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. Tomorrow, she said, voice sharp as cracked ice, we settle this tomorrow. No, I said, tomorrow everything comes to light. My son's face drained of color. Mom? Go home, I told him gently. Think about who you were before someone convinced you I was the problem. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then turned and followed Ruth to the sedan. I watched as she snapped something at him through the open car door. He didn't snap back, just swallowed the words like someone who'd been swallowing things for a very long time. The car pulled away. The wind picked up. The tree inside my house glowed softly against the gathering dark, and I knew, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, that the next time my son stepped into my kitchen, the truth would be waiting for him, and so would the law. Tomorrow was Christmas, and tomorrow justice would arrive. Christmas Day dawned pale and thin, like the sun was hesitant to rise on what it knew was coming. I moved slowly through the house, letting the warmth from the fireplace seep into the rooms one corner at a time. The tree lights blinked softly, casting halos of color against the frost on the windows. It could have been peaceful. It should have been peaceful. But there was an undercurrent in the air, subtle, electric, waiting. By early afternoon, I'd finished setting the table for dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just a roast, vegetables, the pie cooling on the counter. Traditions I continued even when no one came home. Even on years when Christmas felt like an echo instead of a celebration. At 3:30, I heard a car outside. I knew the sound, the uneven idle, the door slam that was always a little too forceful. My son. I took a breath and straightened a napkin that didn't need straightening. He entered without knocking, like he always had, but something in his expression was different today. His eyes were restless, darting. His face was pale. his jaw tight. Behind him, far down the driveway, I caught a glimpse of another car idling. Dark. Familiar. Ruth. The web was tightening. But not around me. "Mom," he said, voice already fraying at the edges. "We need to talk." He didn't take off his coat. He didn't greet me. He didn't look around at the tree or the table or the gifts under it. His mind was somewhere else entirely. "What's wrong?" I asked calmly. "Everything," he said. "You're making everything impossible." There it was. Pressure, wrapped in desperation. I gestured toward the table. "Sit. We can talk." "No," he snapped, then caught himself. I don't have time for a whole thing. I just need you to sign something." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded document. The same one he hid days ago. "I don't sign things I haven't read," I said. "Mom, please." He set it on the table. "It's just a temporary transfer. Just for safety. You've been—" He cut himself off, but the word hung in the air anyway. Overwhelmed. "I'm not transferring my life to you," I said. He slammed his hand on the table. The lights on the tree flickered as if reacting to the shockwave of the moment. "The house is mine now!" he shouted. The room went still. Even the carol music from the kitchen speakers seemed to pause. Then, footsteps behind him. A presence in the doorway, the deputy. He stepped inside quietly, respectfully, his breath misting in the cold air that rushed in with him. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said gently. "Sir, I received a call about a wellness concern at this address." My son's entire face flushed crimson. "What? From who?" The deputy didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the document on the table, tilted it under the tree lights. "I need to verify something with your mother," he said simply. My son's jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous. It's not even official yet." The deputy's brows knit together. "The signature line is filled in on the last page." My son froze. I hadn't signed a thing, but someone had. He swallowed hard. "Mom, just tell him." The deputy turned to me. "Ma'am, is this your handwriting?" And there it was. The moment. The fracture line. The truth, pushing against the surface. I looked at the paper. At the shaky imitation of my signature. At the smudged ink on the corner. "No," I said quietly. "It is not." My son stepped back as if pushed. Mom, please," she said. Ruth said. His words tangled and collapsed on themselves. Ruth appeared in the doorway then, her coat still on, face set in confident calm. "Officer," she said smoothly, "there's been a misunderstanding. The paperwork is legitimate. Mrs. Langley authorized." "No," I said again, firmer this time. "I did not." The deputy held the document higher, eyes narrowing. "Ma'am, this signature doesn't match her records. Not even close." A beat of complete stillness passed. Ruth's expression didn't crack. Not yet, but her fingers tightened around her purse strap. A small pulse of tension traveled through her cheek. My son's breathing turned ragged. "I didn't forge anything. I didn't." She told me. She said it was already signed. "Son," I said softly, "look at it." He did. And in that moment, I saw the truth break over him like a wave. The betrayal he thought was mine was actually hers. The trust he gave her was the weapon she used. He stumbled back against the counter, eyes wide, breath shaking. "Mom," he whispered. "Oh God, what did I do?" "You trusted the wrong person," I said quietly. "That's all." Ruth stepped forward, voice sharp and cold. "Don't listen to her. She's confused. She's lying. You know she's been slipping." "I'm not slipping," I said, stepping closer. But you are. A flicker, tiny but unmistakable, crossed her face. Fear. I didn't need to say a word, I continued softly. The truth is speaking for itself. The deputy unfolded the final page, eyes sharpening. This is a felony-level forgery. Ruth's mouth opened, closed, opened again, like a woman choking on her own excuses. My son stared at her, horror dawning. You said she signed it. You said she wouldn't even remember. You said... Ruth snapped at him under her breath. Shut up! But it was too late. The deputy stepped toward her. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me to answer some questions. The spell broke. Ruth bolted, just turned and ran, past the tree, past the door, slipping on the snow as she tried to reach her car. My son gasped. Ruth! The deputy rushed after her. I remained still, hands gripping the back of a chair for balance, not from weakness, but from something deeper. The gravity of a moment 30 years in the making. The carols continued playing softly behind me, a tender soundtrack to the collapse of a deception that had threatened to devour my life. My son sank to his knees in the kitchen, hands pressed to his face. Mom, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know. I know you didn't, I whispered. Outside, the deputy caught up to Ruth. Her shout pierced the cold air, a jagged, furious sound that carried the weight of every lie she'd told herself to justify her revenge. And then, the arrest, the moment her world finally cracked open, the moment the web collapsed around its weaver. But that, as dramatic as it was not the end. The real end, the one with weight, justice, and moral clarity, was still waiting, and I would walk into it with steady steps. Ruth didn't get far. By the time I stepped outside, pulling my coat around my shoulders, the deputy had her pinned against the hood of her own car, her hands trembling as the metal chilled her palms. Christmas lights from the houses across the street reflected off the ice, casting jagged colors across her face. It was strangely beautiful, in the way storms can sometimes be beautiful, destructive, but honest. Let go of me, she shrieked, twisting against the deputy's grip. You don't understand. She's lying. She's confused. I'm protecting her. The deputy wasn't swayed. Quiet authority radiated from him as he read her the charges. Forgery of a legal document. Fraud. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Attempted coercion. Each word struck like a hammer. Each charge a nail in the coffin of the story she'd built. My son stood on the porch behind me, face ashen, one hand clutching the railing as if it were the only thing holding him upright. The cold wind whipped his coat, but he didn't seem to feel it. Mom, he whispered, voice breaking, I didn't know she forged anything. I swear, she told me you signed everything already. I know, I said softly. I saw it in your face when you realized. The deputy pulled Ruth upright. Her hair had fallen from its neat twist, strands clinging to her cheeks. Her composure, a lifetime of perfected appearances, was gone. What did you think was going to happen? I asked her quietly. She snapped toward me, eyes blazing. You don't get to talk to me. But I do, I said, stepping closer. Because you dragged my son into your bitterness. You made him believe he was saving me, when really he was sinking himself deeper into your lies. He came to me, she spat. He begged for help. You should be grateful Grateful, I repeated. You tried to take my home, my independence, my reputation, everything I built with dignity over a lifetime. You preyed on his desperation and called it guidance. Her jaw trembled, a crack under the surface. You ruined my family, she hissed. Your husband exposed my brother and left us with nothing. My husband exposed the truth, I said. Your brother left you with nothing. She lunged, but the deputy held her firmly. Ma'am, he said calmly, stop resisting. Her breath poured out in white, frantic bursts. She struggled again, harder this time, her fury shredding what little control she'd held onto. Her voice rose higher, desperate, unhinged. "She's lying! She's delusional! She can't even remember things! She's old! She's weak!" I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't respond. Quiet resilience is a powerful thing. It disarms people who expect chaos. The deputy tightened his hold. "I'm done asking nicely," he said. "Stop resisting." My son stepped forward then, tears streaking down his face. "Ruth, stop, please." You used me," she snarled. "You were too stupid to see you needed using." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, shaking his head, grief mixing with humiliation, betrayal, and something else, awakening. In that moment, I saw the child he had been, the boy who trusted too easily, the man who wanted approval so badly he mistook manipulation for support. And I saw the break, the moment he finally understood. He whispered, "Mom, I'm so sorry." "Come here," I said. He stepped into my arms like he had years ago when nightmares pulled him from sleep. His shoulders shook as he cried into my coat. I held him, not in forgiveness yet, but in recognition. He had been wrong, he had been weak, but he was not beyond redemption. The deputy clicked the handcuffs around Ruth's wrists. The sound was sharp, final, satisfying in a way only truth can be. She jerked against them. "You're making a mistake. I'm the victim. I'm the one who—" But the deputy lifted the forged document in his gloved hand. "This signature," he said, "is freshly smudged. You used cheap toner. You hurried the job. That's why the ink wasn't fully set." Her face drained of color. "And," he continued, "you left your fingerprint in the corner." The world stilled. My son inhaled sharply. Her knees buckled. Finally, her voice cracked. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The deputy guided her into the back of the patrol car. She didn't fight anymore. Not because she'd accepted defeat, but because the truth had done what resistance never could. It had broken her. The car door slammed shut with a heavy, echoing thud. The same sound, deep and final, that I remembered from 30 years ago when her family faced their reckoning. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. The patrol car drove away, tires crunching through snow, lights flashing red and blue across the winter dusk. For a long moment, the colors danced across the trees, the porch, the snowbank, like Christmas lights with an honest purpose. Silence settled slowly after that. A quiet, meaningful silence. My son stood beside me, tears still drying on his cheeks. "Mom, you didn't deserve any of this." "No," I said gently, "but I survived it." He wiped his eyes, ashamed. "I let her talk me into everything. She made it sound like you weren't safe, like you couldn't, like you were slipping." "That's how manipulators work," I said. "They twist concern into a weapon. They turn love into leverage." "I hurt you," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "but you're here now. And the truth is here too. That's what matters." He nodded, his breath shaking. We went back inside together. The warmth of the house washed over us. The scent of pine, the soft glow of the lights, the carols playing from the kitchen speaker. For the first time in days, the house felt like my home again. My sanctuary, my truth, my life, intact. My son sat at the table, head in his hands. "Mom, can you ever forgive me?" "In time," I said. "Forgiveness is a process. But love, that's constant." He looked up, eyes full of gratitude and regret. "Thank you." I reached over and gently straightened the same pencil he'd knocked over days ago. The gesture felt symbolic, a quiet return to order. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, peaceful, cleansing. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't let myself admit. Redemption isn't loud. Justice isn't cruel. And strength isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to stand anyway. The same door Ruth once walked through to try and dismantle my life was the door that closed behind her as she was taken away. A circle completed. A storm survived. A truth restored. Christmas, after all, is a season of miracles. Some are wrapped in paper, others in handcuffs. I didn't know it then, but that moment, standing in the quiet after the patrol car pulled away, was the beginning of something new. Not vengeance, not triumph, just peace. A steady kind of peace that comes when the truth finally has room to breathe. If you've ever had your world turned upside down by someone you thought you could trust, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. And if you found any strength in mine, please like this video, subscribe, and stay with me, because you never know what tomorrow might bring.